welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and things are changing rapidly in the Commander format. I think the last couple of months has been the most rapid amount of change, and maybe the most amount of change period in the Commander format, certainly since I've been playing, maybe since forever. And of course, there's so much more to come. Also, we've seen a lot of change in the Commander format with regards to cards, because of course they're constantly making new ones, power creep, Commander staples. I just made a video about how Blasphemous Act I took out of a deck because we're even getting to that point now where the super commandery staples we might start taking out of my deck. I've talked about, like maybe 2 years ago, I talked about how I took Return to Dust out of all of my decks. That's a card that has been a commander staple since forever. And I also have made videos about how me personally, my deck building strategies have changed quite a bit. There's certain staples that I stopped playing for a variety of reasons. And in fact, Dockside Extortionist, which was banned, I talked about how I took it upon myself to take that out of my own deck probably about a year before it actually got banned. I thought it would be really interesting. I've been doing this a while. It's been almost 4 years. My 4-year anniversary is coming up, in fact. And I thought it would be interesting to actually go back and look at the physical deck lists for the decks I posted on my channel, some of the very first deck lists I posted on my channel, and see what they look like as compared to how I build the decks now. So this is a combination of, let's look at all the cards that people were playing back then, what I was playing, but likely that's what pretty much everyone was playing as far as the commander staples go. But, I would imagine looking at these deck lists that a lot has changed with regards to just the way I build decks as well. So let's take a look at some decks. All right, here we go. Aegar, the Freezing Flame. For those who are at all curious, I actually wasn't aware of this until I went back and looked. This was the first deck list I ever posted online. And when I say that, I don't just mean for my channel. I mean entirely the first deck list I ever posted online, ever, because I never used to do that. And in fact, when I first started my channel, and of course, Kaldheim was the first set to come out after I started my channel. So I started my channel right after Commander Legends came out, and started making a lot of decks for Commander Legends. So a lot of the first videos that I posted on my channel were Commander Legends decks, but I didn't actually do deck lists. I was just talking about the commanders. That's essentially how I did deck techs back then, here's how I built around this commander, right? And of course, people were asking me, hey, you got a deck list? You got a deck list, right? So eventually, when I got to Kaldheim and started posting decks about the different commanders from Kaldheim, I guess Aegar was the first one that I actually posted a deck list for. And then, of course, the rest is history. This was my Aegar Pingers deck. I thought he was an interesting, what is it? Dealt, I don't even remember what this guy does. Dealt excess damage. Giant wizard or spell you control dealt damage to it. Right. So I thought an interesting way to go was Pingers, because Pingers are mostly wizards. So you'll see a lot of pinging wizards in here, and all you have to do is have damage dealt to a creature or planeswalker. If it's dealt excess damage, if that some of that damage was done by a wizard. So if I cast, any kind of board wipe or something like a Blasphemous Act, all I have to do is activate this guy first, because then it will trigger my commander, right? Anyway, we're looking at the individual cards. There's a couple that stand out to me. The first thing that stands out to me is the mana curve here. And again, this is not something that I was prepared for. I'm figuring this out as I go here. It looks a lot heavier than what I see nowadays. I would say nowadays when I make decks, and this might be a power creep thing, there is a lot more 2s and 3s, not a lot less of the heavy stuff, right? This has a very heavy mana curve. Lots of 5s, 6s, and 7s in here, right? So that would be a big difference, I would say, from what I see now. Couple things on individual cards. Chain Reaction, again, talking about, the cards that you see or don't see anymore. I haven't put Chain Reaction in a deck in a long time. That's definitely a power creep thing. I think if we're just talking about red board wipes, Delayed Blast Fireball is one that I am a big fan of, that I would put in a deck over this. I don't know what else, but certainly to me, again, I just talked about Blasphemous Act. So if Blasphemous Act is starting to get power crept out of the format, certainly Chain Reaction is as well. This is a card I haven't put in a deck in forever, a long time. Another thing, obviously, is Cyclonic Rift, and this is one that I just took out of my decks because, again, that's my strategy. My strategy is I don't like playing cards that everyone is going to hate because it's just going to make me a target. So I used to put Cyclonic Rift again. And this is a card I used to love, right, guys? I don't do this stuff for my own personal benefit. I do it because I think it's a great strategy. Yes, this is a really good card, but it not only, I mean, even if you win the game, everyone's still going to hate. It just isn't a satisfying win, and nobody wants to play against the guy that is going to be casting Cyclonic Rifts all the time in games. I don't know. That's just sort of my mentality. Just keeps the format more fun and casual, and that's kind of what we all want, right? It also, and again, when I go back and look at my old deck lists, I will also point out they're a lot pricier than they are now. I didn't care about budget at all, right? I never made this deck in paper, right? I just made this for my channel. So I didn't really care about budget. And you'll notice, I'm pretty sure I put fetch lands. Yep, I put fetch lands. All my decks had fetch lands, which I would say a 2-color deck doesn't even really need a fetch land. It's not going to make that big of a difference. We have enough lands that add 2 colors now that I also don't really play Devil the False God much anymore. I might still put it in Izzet deck maybe, but I used to put it in just about every deck. Fetch lands, again, I'm a little more budget conscious than I used to be. I really didn't care back in the day so much. I was more concerned with actually building around whatever commander, right? And tutors is another one. I used to put Mystical Tutor in like every blue deck I made. And it's so funny to think about this now. I can't count the amount of times I would, in games back in the day, Mystical Tutor for Cyclonic Rift. But it was just a solution for me. All these dudes are going off. Dude's got Avenger Zendikar with, 30 plant tokens, and he's putting, this was a solution for me. A solution was, just bounce it, I guess, just get everything back to parity. But now you think about, man, Mystical Tutor for my Cyclonic Rift feels like a very not casual play to a lot of people, right? So yeah, there was no specific reason for this card to be in the deck other than, like, I used to just tutor for solutions, right? I used to just tutor for typically removal, especially Mystical Tutor. Mystical Tutor was just go get a removal spell or a board wipe or something. So I used to put it in all my decks. And again, not only is it, I'm making myself less of a target, I'm making my deck more casual by taking these cards out, but also saving a lot of money, right? My decks are a lot cheaper by not playing cards like this. So that's something interesting to take into consideration as well. All right, let's look at the Reidane deck that I made. And I never had this guy in paper. I will point out that a little bit of inside information here. My original personal decks video that I did on my channel, which is my most viewed video, all of those decks weren't in paper, right? I actually, again, didn't really make a distinction back in the day because I didn't realize people did that. I just talked about my decks. So I didn't actually have 28 decks. I did 28 deck techs in that video. I didn't actually have 28 personal decks in paper. Maybe I had half that many, right? The rest were all digital, and pretty much all of my Kaldheim decks that I did on that video, they were all just the digital ones that I had made recently, and Reidane was one of them. I never actually put it together in paper, which again, made it so that the budget wasn't really an issue for me. So I just put in the cards that worked really well. And a real funny one that stands out to me is Force Field. And it's kind of a nostalgic card for me because it's one of the first cards I ever mentioned on my 10 cards video. I thought it was a funny card. And we got to read the errata text here. The next time an unblocked creature of your choice would deal combat damage to you this turn, prevent all but one of that damage. That's actually a really great effect. There's a few issues that come into play here. Obviously, this is fantastic with the backside of Valkyria, the shield side. By the way, I put Reidane in a lot of 99, great 99 card index, because if a source opponent controls would deal damage to your permanent you control, prevent one of that damage. So this is going to reduce it to 1. For only 1 mana, you can reduce all your damage to 0, right? Obviously a great fit here. The only problem, this is like a $800 card or something. I don't know how much it is now. But again, I didn't take that into consideration. And I had mentioned this on my 10 cards videos. And someone said, yeah, Force Field would be great, but it's like a $600, like it was like an $800 or $600 card or something at the time. And I was like, I had not even thought of that. Again, that didn't really occur to me when I was making those videos. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I should be a little more conscious of, I can still suggest this card. Maybe someone actually has it sitting in their collection at home. Maybe, who knows, right? So it's not the end of the world to suggest a card that some people might actually want to play if they have it or if they have the money to go buy it. But I started being a lot more conscious of cards like this, cards that, hey, maybe it's really expensive. So giving it a suggestion might not be the best idea. The removal here is funny. First of all, Rebuff the Wicked is one that I used to put in all my white decks. And of course, it started going to the wayside because, I mean, you could still play it, but Blacksmith Skill is just better in almost every situation, I think. It's kind of funny to counter someone's spell in white, but I can't think of a situation where Blacksmith Skill isn't better. Any targeted removal is Blacksmith Skill is going to be better, obviously, because it gives your creature hexproof. And Blacksmith Skill also works on any permanent. I guess this works on any permanent too. Blacksmith Skill also, though, is going to give Indestructible, which is going to work against board wipes, which this does not. So Blacksmith Skill is just better than this in every situation. I don't really play Rebuff the Wicked anymore. Condemn. That's right. People used to play this. This might be the last deck I ever put this in. This actually used to be a fairly popular removal spell in the format. Put target attacking creature on the bottom of its owner's library. Its controller gains life equal to its toughness. I used to play this quite a bit. And I did have Swords and Path in this deck, but I think back when I made this deck, Swords was still, again, relatively expensive. And Path was, like this was $8 card probably. It was, of course, a modern staple. Every white modern deck had 4 in there, and it hadn't been reprinted a zillion times. Now this card it's like 30 cents or something, right? It's been reprinted into oblivion. And, obviously I had both in here, but I like lots of removal. And, someone's coming at me with their Blightsteel Colossus, zoop, stick that on the bottom of your library. And again, another reason why this was played quite a bit back in the day in Commander is because they didn't have the tuck rule, and you could tuck someone's commander on the bottom of their library and they wouldn't be able to get it back because that's the way it used to work. So any card that tucked commanders on the bottom or shuffled them into library were way more popular back then, and this is definitely one of them, but obviously nobody plays it anymore. Worn Power Stone, another commander staple that I've pretty much gone completely away from. I don't really play it anymore at all. I don't think I have this in any decks. This used to be another one that I would put in every deck. Especially monocolored decks that weren't green. I might have even put it in my mono green decks. I was a big fan of this for a long time, and it went in just about all of my decks, and now I think I don't play it at all anymore. There's just too many really good 2-mana rocks now. And again, look at the mana curve here. The 2s, not a lot of 2s, right? Now, and I think the mana rocks would be a big one. I would have a lot more. I might have Ornithopter Paradise in here. I might have Liquid Metal Torque for sure. I put that in all my mono white decks. There probably would be a lot more 2-mana rocks in here. The big ones, I mean, you look at the card draw, the ramp, like I would put a Deep Gnome Terramancer in here. I would put obviously Stoic Farmer just came out. That's a good one. Definitely don't play Return to Dust anymore, as I just talked about. I got Smothering Tithe in here. Again, that's a card just like Cyclonic Rift that I'm like, just put it in every deck, right? Just put it in every white deck. And I stopped doing that. I now have Smothering Tithe officially in 0 decks. I had it in 1 deck and I took it out. It's a card that I no longer play. The card draw and the ramp are the big, like there's no Esper Sentinel here that I would put in. There's no Archivist of Ogma that I would put in, all those cards. Also the board wipe situation, Myrtle Sun. There's another card that I used to put in like every deck. I loved this card. It's obviously just great value. It's extra card draw, spells are cheaper, Anthem for your creatures, but I also loved it because it hated on Planeswalkers, and I hate Planeswalkers, and I played against a lot of Super Friends back in the day. So this card, I just started grabbing it and putting it in every deck, just in case I was up against a Super Friends deck. The board wipes is the big one here, right? Cleansing Nova is definitely a board wipe that I used to play a lot. I remember when it first came out, I grabbed like 8 copies and threw them on all my white decks. And now I think I have it again in 0 decks. This is another board wipe that for me, again, we've gotten to the situation where a board wipe that just destroys all creatures or destroys all artifacts and enchantments is just not quite good enough. Of course, I still play Austere Command. That would be the one board wipe that is sort of held up. Hour of Revelation is another one that I play a little bit less. It is still really good. But again, I like to play the board wipes that give me an advantage, and this doesn't give me one. It just blows up everything. So I don't love that. And Hollowed Burial is another one that I still have this in one deck. This is another one I used to play a lot more that has sort of shied away from. It does get around Indestructible. Again, this is another board wipe that used to get played way more because it tucked people's commanders on the bottom of their libraries, and people don't play it much anymore. But I still have this in, and I would recommend it. It gets around Indestructible. It gets around a lot of stuff. I would recommend it in a deck where you can search for stuff. I have this in Kellen deck, my combo deck, because I want a board wipe that advantages me so I can tuck my creatures on the bottom of my library, and any of those important creatures that I need to search for, I have the ability in my deck to go get them. So it's okay if I tuck them on the bottom of my library because I can go get them again. It's better than the situation of, I mean, it's certainly better than Exile, and it's probably better than Destroy even. So there you go. That's what a mono white deck looked like for me about 4 years ago. Pretty interesting. All right, Svella, Ice Shaper is another one that I made on my channel. This is one of the biggest surprises for me. When I first saw this commander, I was just like, that's terrible. You're doing like an artifact theme in red and green and snow, a Gruul snow commander. That ability is insanely expensive, like it just didn't seem that great. I did end up making a pretty good deck, and then funny enough, I ended up upgrading that deck. So again, look at the mana curve here. Insane. 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s. I even put a Blightsteel Colossus in this deck because I was trying to make it worth it. Because I was like, I mean, if you're going to spend 8 mana, I don't want to get the game one. Again, Immortal Sun. I threw that card in just about every deck. Force of Vigor is another one that, it's funny. This card's actually kind of not that expensive anymore. This is another card that as soon as I saw it, I'm like, hey, I love removal. That's going in every green deck. It got real expensive. Of course, the CEDH guys started playing it. And whenever that happens, cards skyrocket in price. So I started again, when I become more budget conscious, and I realized that being able to do, I mean, it's nice to be able to do that for free. I actually liked it just because it was a 4-mana instant speed spell that destroyed 2 artifacts and enchantments. The fact that you could do it for free was okay, but I just liked it because, I mean, how many spells out there can instant speed destroy 2 artifacts and enchantments for 4 mana? Not a lot. That's why I liked it. Maybe I'll start playing again. I think it's a little bit cheaper now. It has been reprinted a few times. Looks like it was reprinted in, what is this, Outlaws of Thunder Junction or something. So yeah, maybe I'll start playing it again. It is definitely a good card. Again, I got both Sylvan Tutor and Worldly Tutor in here. I played Tutors a lot more back then. This one in particular, though, I mean, it works with your commander, right? You tutor a Blightsteel Colossus at the top of your library. Sylvan Library, again, that's another card that I probably used to put in decks a lot because it's just a good card, right? For me, my strategy back then was I'm just trying to make this underwhelming commander good. That's it. That was more my strategy. I mean, I've talked about this in a few videos, and I don't know if I've talked about it entirely in a video yet, but essentially it was, okay, here's a commander that I don't think is very good. Again, though, this is a commander that surprisingly was a lot more popular than I thought it would be. But I thought, man, there's not much to do here. So I'm going to put the powerful cards in, and the expensive cards in, like Worldly Tutor and Sylvan Library, even though people might not think that's very casual. Doubling season, right? This is probably a really expensive deck because I'm trying to make this underwhelming commander good. That was more my strategy back then. Again, my strategy has changed quite a bit since then. I don't do that nearly as much. And I will say this goes into the banning thing a little bit, how, a lot of people are like, okay, well, let's just ban all these powerful, expensive cards. But for me, I like those cards to be available because then I can take the really casual or really janky themes or really underwhelming commanders and make them a little better by playing a Gaia's Cradle or something in that deck, right? That's sort of my mentality about it. It's all about what your deck is doing. Is your deck doing something casual? If it is, then I'm okay with it, right? All right, let's end off with a personal deck of mine. My Iname is one deck. This is the first deck of mine that I ever posted on this is the first deck I ever did on my channel. That was my actual deck. It was my first time ever doing my personal deck. And something that I started doing when I started my channel that I wasn't expecting, you figure this stuff out as you go, is people seem to be really interested in my decks, which I didn't expect that to happen. And I thought, okay, well, I'll put my name as one deck on there because people have asked about it quite a bit. And another thing is that just happens incidentally, and I just happen to do all the time. I do it way more than any other content creator. I name drop my own decks a lot. So I'm constantly, oh, I have this card in my name as one deck, or I have this card in my Abishon deck, or I do this thing in this deck, or I do that, right? I name drop my own decks a lot. I realized, and because I do that, people are like, "Oh, what's up with this name is one deck? I never heard of that commander. Can we get a deck?" And I started getting a lot more requests, and so I posted my name is one deck. That was the first deck of mine that I posted on my channel, and then I ended up just doing. I'm like, okay, well, I think it was my 5,000 subscribers video. I am like, I'll just do all my deck. Here you go, guys. Now going forward, constantly I'm referencing my own decks. I can just point you here, over here. Go watch that video. There's all my decks. And of course, I've been doing it ever since. So let's see what has changed. And a lot of people have asked me, again, people ask me for updates on my decks all the time. I don't know, guys. It's tough to constantly, every time I take a couple cards out of my name is one deck or any deck, then I got to go and update the list. And I would have to update this a lot. I imagine this is a lot different. And a big one here is, I mean, let's see. First of all, I don't play Soul Ring anymore. And it's funny. I think I had already started to move away from Soul Ring when I started my channel. I was already getting there, but I kept it in decks like my Abishon deck. I believe my Abishon deck was the last deck I ever took it out of because, of course, it's not green, so you need the help a little bit more. And I have a 6-mana commander's kind of a lot. My name is one deck, obviously insanely expensive commander, but I didn't really need it. I mean, it was helpful, but at the end of the day, I'm just getting Cabal Coffers and Urborg or just tons of ramp to get my commander out. So I didn't really need it that much. Again, the mana base is going to be pretty expensive here. That actually hasn't changed. I don't have fetch lands in my own personal decks. I don't have a lot of fetch lands. This is one because it is a little bit of a lands theme in this deck, right? So I do have Verdant Catacombs. I do not have Golgari Rot Farm. I started taking bounce lands, and again, I used to play bounce lands a lot more, and then I'm started to realize, man, these kind of slow me down, and I don't love it, and it's not ramp, even though it feels like it, and I started playing them a lot less. I used to play them way more, and I play them a lot less now. I only play them in decks where I actually want cards in hand. That's where I think bounce lands are an advantage, and I do have a couple of decks like that. For example, in my Bralin deck, I can play a bounce land to pick up a land so that I can then discard it. So there's a strategy for using bounce lands. Look at this card. Anyone remember this card? That's right. This actually was played for a while. I played this for a while. I think a lot of other people did as well. Man, talk about power crept out of existence. Epic Downfall. 1 and a black sorcery. Exile target creature with mana value 3 or greater. Hoo-wee. Yeah, this was actually played for a while. A lot of you guys probably don't remember it. And in fact, a lot of you newer Commander players have probably never even seen it before. This was actually played for a while. I remember when it first came out, there was a few content creators talking about, hey, this seems pretty viable for Commander. Not so much anymore, right? This has definitely been power crept out of the form. I don't know if anyone still plays this. I certainly don't. Phyrexian Arena for me is another one that I used to put in every deck. Almost every deck, again, used to be pretty expensive too, not so much anymore. And I don't want to get too much into, why I play or don't play individual cards, but this for me, it's funny. I used to, the guys that would say that this is not a very good card draw option, I'm like, what are you talking about? You just play it and then it just sits there drawing you cards every turn. That's pretty good, right? And the more I thought about it, and again, maybe it's a little bit of a power creep situation, but I started thinking about two things. One thing was, okay, this is 3 mana, draw 0 cards. I mean, I don't like to do this too much, okay? Like this whole, there's a card that doesn't impact the board right away, but it is 3 mana, I get nothing, and then I gotta wait a whole turn cycle to get 1 card. So now I've waited an entire turn cycle, paid 3 mana, gotten 1 card. In order for this card to actually get good, you have to draw 3 cards off of it, right? 3 cards, lose 3 life for 3 mana. That's good. Of course, there are one-shots that will do that. So that means I play this turn 3 and not till turn 6 am I actually getting to a good point with this card, assuming it hasn't been destroyed, right? I mean, it's still, I'm not going to say it's bad. I would have no problem with anyone putting it in their deck. For me, I've moved away from it. Certainly moved away from this card. Again, I've moved more, and of course I don't have Greater Good in this deck. That has become one of my favorite draw spells or draw options in the entire format. It's a slam dunk here because not only is my commander huge, but I want it to be dying. Like, why didn't I have it in there before? I don't know. It's just one of those cards I didn't think of, right? You have certain cards in your head, especially when you build decks as frequently as I do. This is just one that I'm just, okay, just throw it in there, right? It's the stapley stuff, which makes it's a lot quicker to build decks when you have all the staples in your head and you just go plug those in, right? You don't actually think that much about why you're putting them in there. I am more the incidental card draw is good in certain situations. In a situation like this deck, I have moved entirely towards just big, huge. I sacrifice a creature, draw 8 cards kind of situation. I like that situation a lot more. I mean, I probably have Rishkar's expertise in here. That would be a similar one in that sort of scenario. Cards that I don't have in this deck anymore. There's so many. Again, Demonic Tutor is another one that I just used to put. Why wouldn't you put it in there, right? I don't play tutors hardly at all anymore. Only in the decks where I specifically need to be tutoring, if that makes any sense. I know. There's certain decks where I have, my Painter's Servant deck, or there's certain pieces that I need. I will go tutor for those pieces. I'm not going to put a tutor in a deck just because why not put it in there? Again, like I'm going to put a Mystical Tutor in my deck because I want to go get maybe an answer later in the game, or I want to put a demon. I mean, here I actually do need to tutor for stuff, but the stuff I need to tutor for, I can very easily get because they're lands, and I can do that. That's why that's basically what the deck does. So there's no reason for a Demonic Tutor. That's gone. Obviously, Epic Downfall's long gone. I also have Hero's Downfall in here. Oh boy, that's long gone. Goodbye, Hero's Down. Talk about a card that's been power crept out of the format. Gaze of Granite I used to have in here too. I don't have this in the deck anymore. It's still pretty good. Again, the reason it works good in this deck is because, geez, I don't know. Maybe it still is good in the deck. Obviously, I can generate a ton of mana. So it's very easy for me to get just about everything off the board. But also because I have some really pricey stuff in here, I can engineer it so that I don't really get, I get all my opponent's stuff and I still have, so it can be the board wipe that gives you an advantage. So, maybe I should think about putting that back in. It's actually pretty good. Obviously Putrefy. There's a card I don't play anymore that obviously everyone used to. Gone. I haven't put this in a deck in years. This is probably the last place you'll ever see me put it in a deck. Deadly Rollick is a funny one because, again, just like everybody, when the free spells came out in Ikoria, I was like, just put that in every deck. I realized it's actually not good in this deck. Not only is it expensive, again, why not save myself some money? It's actually not good in this deck because my commander isn't on the battlefield much, right? That's something you got to think about with regards to Deadly Rollick or Fierce Guardianship or Deflecting Swat or any of those, right? Because this is actually a bad removal spell. 4 mana exile a creature is bad. The only reason this is good is because it might be free. Same with Fierce Guardianship. 3 mana, counter a non-creature spell only. Terrible. The only reason it might be good is because your commander's on the battlefield. If it's not, it's a terrible counterspell. I actually don't have my commander in play much in this deck, right? It obviously takes me a long while to get it out. And then likely I'm going to be sacrificing it or having it die. It's not on the battlefield that much. So Deadly Rollick's actually a really bad removal spell here. And of course, again, I think Baleful Mastery came out right after I made this. And I just took out this and put Baleful Mastery in, right? We have so many better options now. So why put this in there, right? Death Sprout is another one that, do I still have this in the deck? Actually, I'm trying to think if I maybe have it in there. This is another one that when it came out, a lot of people were playing it in their decks. I'm pretty sure I took it out. I kept it for a while because it is ramp, but it's really slow ramp. So, and this is one of those tricky cards where you kind of want to ramp on turn 4, but there's not really any good creatures to kill. So you end up killing a creature that's not great just so you can get the ramp. I don't love it. I end up Binding the Old Gods is one that I think I replaced Death Sprout with that I play a lot more. What else did I take out of here? And maybe, Vraska's Contempt. Yeah, gone. Again, the removal's the big one here. Tear Asunder, there's one that I probably took this out and put that in. Actually, I probably took this out a long time ago. But again, this is another removal. You look at the removal in here, that's the big one, right? Hero's Downfall, Epic Downfall, Vraska's Contempt. all removal spells. Death Sprout that really see no play anymore, mostly because of power creep. Dictative Erebos is a funny one that I used to play in every deck. Again, that's funny. I almost never see this card anymore. Increasing Ambition is one. I just talked about this with my patrons. And a little bit getting into the power bracket thing coming up. I was talking with them about it, and where do, it looks like they have tutors going in certain different brackets. The unconditional tutors that people say are so powerful, the black ones that you can just get any card with, are going to go in bracket 1. Is this going to go in bracket 1? 5 mana, search your life. Like, this used to be, again, another card that people played in. I used to put this in all my black decks because I thought, okay, 5 mana, go get any card. And then later in the game, when I'm really hard up, 8 mana to go get 2 cards, and one can be some answer. Again, I can go get a board wipe or something, and the other one can be, I don't know, my win con, something to help me win the game. And I don't play this card anymore. I have it in 0 decks. I don't know who does play it anymore. I haven't seen it in forever. It used to be a commander staple. I wonder where they would put this in the bracket system. Curious to know about that. I don't even know what this card is. Oh, Status Statue. Another removal spell that, who still plays this? I thought this one was great because not only is it 4 mana, destroy artifact, creature, or enchantment, which is not any permanent, but it's pretty close. 4 mana, instant speed, almost destroy any permanent. You can't get a planeswalker or a land with this, I guess, or a battle. But artifact, creature, enchantment obviously is going to get you most things you want to be targeting. But also, target creature gets +1/+1, gains death touch until end of turn is pretty good too. So yeah, who still plays this card? I don't. I actually almost forgot what it did. In Garrick's Wake, again, another card that used to be super commander stapley that I don't really see ever anymore. Another one that I don't play anymore. I haven't played this in forever. It's funny because now I'm talking about the board wipe that advantages you, but 9 mana, holy man. The problem with that is, this is going to give me a huge advantage, but what if I can't cast it when I need to cast a board wipe? What if I only have like 7 mana and I really badly need to cast a board wipe and I got this in hand? That feels really bad. So I've shied away from really expensive board wipes. I think I would probably play like a Decree of Pain over this for sure, because Decree of Pain, not only is it, I think it's 8 mana, right? It's 1 cheaper. You also can cycle it if you really just need to get a bunch of little creatures off the board. And of course, it also draws you a ton of cards. So I would probably play that over this. Again, that used to be really expensive. It probably isn't so much anymore. And the Great Henge, again, another card that it just instantly became a commander staple. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to put that in every deck. And of course, it works better here because I have lots of big creatures. And I'm like, okay, card draw, life gain, mana rock, put counters on my creature. Why wouldn't you put this in there? Again, that was the mentality back then. Whenever, they really, what is this? Throne of Eldraine, of course, right? Because Throne of Eldraine was probably the first big set where they just put like, here's 1,000 commander staples that you're going to want to put in all your commander decks, despite the fact that it was not a commander set. And of course, it has some of the most popular cards of all time in it, Arcane Signet included. Also, some of the most popular commanders of all time. It really is one of the most impactful commander sets ever. And this was a card that take it out of my decks because not only is it it's removal magnet for sure. Absolutely removal magnet. It also is one of those cards where it's just like, I'm kind of getting bored of it. It does a lot. It certainly is good and it fit in this deck. But I'll save myself some money. I'll save myself being the target. And I just stopped putting this in decks. And I never looked back. I have this in 0 decks. Don't really play it anymore. So it's this is a combination of these funny old like removal spells and stuff that we never see anymore because of power creep. It's funny how things have changed. This is about 4 years now. So this is how much things have changed in 4 years, but also how I've changed with regards to my deck building. So there you go, just a little trip down memory lane. I thought it would be interesting. I was sort of showing all my old deck lists to my patrons on my Patreon, and I thought, you know what, why don't I take a look at some of these old deck lists and see how different they are? And I thought it would be an interesting thing to do on the channel to see how much things have changed in the last 4 years. They have certainly changed a lot. And looking at these deck lists that are kind of frozen in time, that, I don't change them. I've left them exactly as they were when I first posted them 4 years ago. So nothing has changed. It's sort of like a time capsule looking at what commander deck lists looked like back then. And it's still not bad, right? Again, you could still play an epic downfall in a commander game and you're just fine. No problem. Any of these decks, someone could take and, copy paste it and download the deck list or whatever and order the cards and play that deck, and you would be just fine. Again, that's one of the things I love about the Commander format, and unfortunately things are changing, so this might not work anymore. One of the things I don't love about all the changes that are going on, it used to be that in the Commander format you could have a deck that is just sitting in your closet collecting dust for 4 or 5 years, bring it out and away you go, and maybe you don't have the newest best cards ever, but your deck could still do just fine, right? You wouldn't have to constantly be updating it. Again, they've turned Commander into a rotating format now, which I don't love at all. I'm really going to start not updating my decks anymore. The decks I'm happy with, I'm just going to be like, I leave it alone, and that is all. And you very much should be able to take these old deck lists of mine. I mean, it's only 4 years ago. It hasn't been that long. Download them and play them, and you should be just fine. Some of these removal spells aren't as good as the ones we have now, but they are still pretty good, right? Give it a try. See how it works out for you. Thought it would be an interesting thing to look at some of these old deck lists. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. That's it for today, and thanks for tuning in.